Okay, welcome to episode 2 of the IC10 programming series. So in this episode we're just going to expand on some of the concepts that we learned in the first episode. So in the first episode we basically had a light that is controlled with this lever to go on and off. Now we're going to use a couple of different things like the sensors and whatnot to to do some other stuff. But firstly, we got to start talking about logistics. So right now, um, one of the issues that we have is that when you put down an IC housing, so when you start having multiple in your computer, it's going to have two different IC housing, and you actually need to know which one you're talking to so that you correctly export to the right place. So what you can do is actually label them. So for instance, what I would normally do, so with the labeler, so I would call this the ICH, so the IC housing, and this is like, light lever, right? So now when we go back here, we've got two, right? We've got the ICH light lever, which is this one, and then we've got the regular ICH. So what we'll actually rename this one as well. So what we're going to do with this one is we'll just call this sensor, because we're going to muck around with the sensor a bit more. Okay, so we go into the sensor, and so look, what we're going to do is, this is an occupancy sensor. So what we basically want to do is, when this is occupied, we want this door to open, and then when it's not occupied, we want the door to close. So if it's detected that we're here, this should open, and then we're in here, it should close. And we want this light to turn on when it detects that it's nighttime. So those are the things that we want to try and do in this IC script. So we're just basically just expanding on the concepts. Nothing too crazy at this stage. I think episode 3 will redo the solar tracking. Okay, so first thing we do is edit on our computer. Now we'll just clear this. Let's just clear this. So if you remember from the first episode, we want to set up a basic shell script, right? So the first thing we do is we define devices, which is D0 to D5. Then we're going to define variables, which is R0 to R15. And then we're going to do main loop, right? Main loop. And for this we do start, and then down here we go jump start. Okay, so this is so what I recommend you do when you're starting out is just write in comments what you're trying to do. So in terms of devices, what do we have? We're going to have the blast door, right? We're going to have the door. We're going to have the occupancy sensor. We're going to have the light, and we're going to have the daylight sensor, right? So what I would do in this case, so blast door, right? So let's go, well, let's put alias. So what do we want to call it? Let's just call it door. And this can be device 0. Okay, occupancy sensor. So alias, we might call this occupancy, and we'll call this D1. The light, alias light D2, and the daylight sensor, alias daylight D3. Right? So these are our aliases. So if we just confirm that, and we've got to make sure that we are connected to ICH sensor, and we hit export. So export is going to save that script, whatever's on the computer, to this chip. And if we now turn this on, you'll see that in D1 it wants the door, and then in this one it wants the occupancy, the light, and over here the daylight. So one other challenge we're actually going to run into is that there is a flashing light here and there is a flashing light here. So once again, if because there's multiple devices, you might find it's just much better just to rename one of them, right? So we'll call this room. We'll call this night, actually, night flashing light, because it's going to turn on in the nighttime. All right, so now that we've got that, let's assign these devices. All right, so we need the door on this one, so we put the blast door like that. So occupancy sensor is for this one. So let's just cycle until we get the occupancy sensor. The light, we want the night flashing light. And this one, the daylight. So let's look for the daylight sensor. Okay, great. So we've got 4 devices connected to the IC chip, and they're all good to go. So let's go back into our script now. So yeah, one thing to realize is if you move out of the area, and this is a little bit annoying actually, if you move out of the area, the default ICH actually enters like the alphabetical. So what I will often do is I'll put a little, the one I'm programming, I'll put right here. I'll put right here, and I'll call it something like, you know, AAA ICH. But for now, we'll just monitor this. All right. So we've got our aliases. So the variables we'll do as we start the logic. All right. So what we want to do here, so we want to read the occupancy sensor, and then we want to write the value to the door. Right, and then we want to read the daylight sensor, and we want to write the value to the light. Okay, so the first thing, read the occupancy sensor, right? So to read the occupancy sensor, we use the load command. So that's the L. Now, the first thing we need a variable. So I guess let's alias, let's call this is occupied, call this R0, right? So alias is occupied. So here we're going to go is occupied. Now the device is occupancy, and the logic type, so let's remember, press F1 to load this. Now let's look at the occupancy sensor, and let's see what options it has. So it's got activate, quantity, and this. So I'm guessing it's activate that actually, I'm guessing it's activate that will exist if someone, like if it's active, like if someone's near it. I think active is probably going to be true. So let's write that in. And this is one of the things with, wait. Why is that? Oh, activate. So if it doesn't go orange, it means you're doing something wrong. So there we go. So there's a bit of trial and error with this. Sometimes you don't know what the value is. I'm pretty sure it's this value, but we won't really know until we test this, right? So the second thing we want to do is write the value to the door. So we save to the device door, the logic type. So if we look up the blast door, I'm pretty sure it's going to be like, I guess it's open. So it looks like open's going to be the one. So open, and the value we want to give it is occupied. Okay. So let's just confirm that, and let's make sure let's export it to the sensor. Okay, so it doesn't detect things. So it's not, why is it not changing? Gonna have to do a bit of an edit. What if we do proximity? All right, let's have a look at what does occupancy sensor do? Will trigger if there's a player in the same room as the sensor. The quantity value will show the number of players. You can use configure it to only detect players who hold the correct access card. Okay, what about proximity sensor? Will be triggered if the player is in range of the sensor as defined by the setting dial. Okay, it seems better that we use a proximity sensor. So let's go proximity sensor. Oh, I see. Proximity sensor radius 1. So we're going to change it from an occupancy sensor to a proximity sensor. All right. And let's go and see what needs to change now. So we might as well just change this to proximity. Okay. So because we've changed it to a proximity sensor, the logic type might be different, but it looks like it's still going to be activate. So activate, so we'll do that. So we'll write activate, so we'll read activate, and then we'll write it to the door. So let's confirm that, and let's change this to sensor and export it. And there we go. So when we go near that sensor, it opens. And with this particular one, so it looks like this is a dial that says how big a radius. So if we make it 3, I'm pretty sure we can be like 3 spaces away before it doesn't detect us. So you could have it like, whew. Okay, that's lucky. Okay, so that's the first part of our script, which is just basically, so we're using a proximity sensor to open this door. So this is pretty, yeah, pretty simple. And now let's have a look at the daylight sensor. So if we look at the daylight, so press F1, go to daylight sensor. So what does it have? It's got activate, it's got on. So I'm not sure which one of these it's going to be. But I reckon it's probably, I'm going to try activate. So we want to read the daylight sensor. So first we need a variable, so alias. So is daytime R1. Okay, so read the daylight sensor. So we want to go is daytime. The device is daylight, and the logic type is activate. And then we want to save this to the light, logic type of on, and the value is daytime. Okay, so if we have a look at this thing, so obviously it's not daytime, right? So this is going to actually be 0, which is why the light. Now, because we want the light to turn on when it actually is nighttime, we need to invert this. I wonder how we invert this. It's like, Let's have a look. We want to invert. Okay, actually, so what we'll do, so because we can't just write the value, so is daytime, this is actually 0 when it's nighttime, and we want this to turn on during the day. So what we actually need to do is we need to start looking at the concept called branching, right? So there is a function called branch, and then you can go greater than, or you can go branch less than, or branch equal. So you can basically branch on a few different things. So when is daytime is 0, right? So we could go, so branch equal to, so so we have to say is daytime equal to 0. We want to jump to is, or we want to jump to just night time. All right? And like we did with the start, we can actually declare another section called nighttime. Right? And once we're finished here, we actually just jump back to the start. So what this is going to do, so it's going to read the light value. Oh, sorry. We should. Okay, so branch. So basically we're reading is daytime from the daylight sensor and the activate. So if it's 0, if daytime is 0, we want to jump to nighttime, which is here. So, and if it's nighttime, we want to save to the light on, and then we go 1. Right? So it's like if nighttime, turn light on. Right? And then once this executes, it's going to hit this jump and it's going to jump back to the start. So then we also need a branch equal to, if is daytime is equal to 1, we want to jump to daytime. Right? And so then we make a daytime section. And this is if day, turn light off. So in this case, we're going to go S light on 0. And then we're going to jump back to start. So we actually get rid of this now because we're actually doing a some logic here. So it's basically we're basically saying if is daytime equal to 0, jump to night time, and then we're doing if is daytime equal to 1, jump to daytime. Okay. So we're starting to get a little bit more advanced here. So that light is currently off. If we export this now, that light should turn on because, and the reason it turns on is because it's detecting that this is nighttime and therefore the light turns on. Proximity sensor works. All right. So let's just edit this. So we've got that. Is there anything else we want to do? So look, so this is probably just a bit of an expansion to episode 1. So there's a few new concepts that we did. First, as you start dealing with more and more housing, like IC housing, you've got to think about renaming them and whatnot. We've connected up 4 different devices, and we've got 2 sort of logic circuits going. One is very simple. It's just checking if your proximity to the sensor, then it opens the door. But the other one is a bit more advanced. So basically, we're reading in the daylight sensor activate, and we're now doing branching. So branching is where you can start doing a lot more complicated concepts. And this is probably going to be a common sort of check that you're going to do, where sometimes we just want to know whether it's nighttime or daytime, and you want different logic because of that. So in this case, we've got branch equal to. So basically, we're saying we're branch and equal to. So if, and there's a few different ones, right? So you got branch greater than. So if 0 greater than 1, you know, is jump to is bigger. Branch less than. So if 0 so is, smaller. So these are yes, we added the concept of branching. So there's a few different branching ones that you can do. There's branch, and this is just branch equal then. So if is that, so basically how it works is if you do BEQ, it expects 3 numbers. But you can see from the text that it says, branch to line C if A equals B. So it's basically saying if is daytime is equal to 0, then jump to nighttime. Or if is daytime is equal to 1, then jump to daytime. So if we can actually set to daytime using our console command. I think it's orbit set 0.5. Right, it sets it to daytime, and then this sensor is now on, and therefore the light is now off. So that just sort of shows you that logic is working. So before we wrap up episode 2, let's just talk about the import and export buttons. So the computer here is like your working, it's just your working machine. None of this code is actually running anywhere. It's only after you export it to the chips that the code actually runs. So what that means is that, let's say we want to modify this chip here, right? So this is the light lever. We can actually go over here, choose the light lever, and we can hit the import button. And what that's going to do is that's going to bring in the current code that's running on that chip. It's going to bring it in here. So you can see this is the episode 1 code. And if we have a look at what the IC sensor code looks like, and we import that, this will show you what the episode 2 code is. So obviously you can't see all of the code, and you've got to actually edit it to get in there. But that's what you can do. So you do have to be careful. You can overwrite code if you're not careful. So yes, that's what those functions do. And probably so I think that's going to wrap it up for episode 2. So we've just got a bit more of a complicated setup. What I think we'll do next episode, in episode 3, is that we might start thinking about the solar tracking, and we might make a simple solar tracking script for episode 3. All right, we will call it there.